Hello and welcome to episode 18 of Pappy Hour. I'm here with my cousin, Skip Dodge.
Hey,
Welcome, Skip.
Thank you, Pat. It's great to be here. It's a beautiful morning. And what a view.
Yeah, we're here live on the first sunny day of weather we've had in a long time here in San Diego. We've had a tremendous amount of rain. We're bringing this special episode and a special guest, my cousin Skipper, who's actually my first cousin once removed.
Yep.
My mother's first cousin. So I just want to introduce Skip and talk a little bit about him first. So give me your vitals, Skip. Your real name is
William, middle name after my dad, Howard
William
Dodge.
Howard
William Howard
Dodge.
Dodge. Yeah.
All right. Now, how'd you get the nickname Skipper?
Funny story. Two versions.
Oh yeah, we want both.
The first version is, back in those days, the fathers would be in the waiting rooms, nervously smoking cigarettes and cigars,
Pacing around.
waiting for the nurse to bring out the child. And
Yeah, they didn't let him in the room back then.
No. But anyway, so the nurse brings me out, and my dad took one look at me and he said, "Oh, skip it." And the name stuck. Now here's the real story.
Skip it.
All right. So my dad and my Uncle Gail used to work on boats in the backyard.
Okay. Small boats.
Uncle Gail was always repairing a boat or doing something. Dad would help him. And so I was just a little tiny guy. And from what I understand, they used to sit me in the boat and put a little skipper's hat on me, and I got the nickname Skipper.
Gotcha.
That's what I was told.
Because the women came out and said, "Here, he's yours for a little while. We don't care what you do with him, how greasy you get him," and they stuck you in the boat because you couldn't get out.
Right.
And you became the skipper of the boat.
Skipper of the boat.
Oh, that's great.
It's kind of how it happened.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell a quick side note of the story of Skipper, why it's so important to us. And we talked about you so much when I was growing up, because I had a friend growing up. We met in 5th grade. We've talked about him before, my friend Chipper. And for the first time my dad met him, I introduced him. "Hey, Dad, this is my friend Chipper." "Oh, hi, nice to meet you, Skip." So he never, and Chip was my best man at my wedding. He's my great friend today. I talk to him twice a week on the phone. And throughout my dad's entire life, he called my best friend Chipper Skipper. So, Dad, it's good. And it was so, this was maybe why we're in high school. I would say, he would say, "Hey, Skip." And I'd say, "Dad, it's Chip." And Chip would say, "Just let him call me Skipper."
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
So Chipper became Skipper because of you, Skipper.
Loved your dad. Your dad he was quite a guy.
All right. What's your relation to the family? How are we cousins?
Well, my mom and your grandmother are sisters.
Yes. Perry
And
girls.
The Perry girls. And what a crew they were. But that's how we are related.
And that's why you're so close, growing up with my mother, her sisters, and Tim, as all first cousins that lived in the same city, how close did you live to the Carroll clan?
Well, we lived in Willow Glen, and of course, early on, the Carrolls, Tim and Kathy and Karen and Fuzz and
Lived
Trish,
on Swift Lane,
which was an extension of Tully.
into Tully Road.
Into Tully Road.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I can remember when we were little, Tim and I were 8, 9 years old. We used to ride our bikes. It was about, I'm trying to remember exactly how many miles that was, but it was probably a good 4 or 5 miles. And we were little guys, and we used to ride our bikes and meet each other. And then we'd either go over to my house or we'd go back to his house.
Big bike ride.
Big bike rides for little guys back in those days.
Downtown Willow Glen, all the way to the east side.
we'd go all the way down Kirtner.
Yeah.
And Kirtner would go past Oak Hill Cemetery. And then, it was a pretty straight shot.
Yeah. All the way down.
But we did that more than once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what brings Skip as a guest today is we're going to dedicate this episode to my uncle, Skip's first cousin, Tim Carroll. And Tim was killed in the Vietnam War, and we are going to give a little tribute to Tim.
Yeah.
We'll talk about him. We're going to talk about his life. We're going to talk about his experience in Vietnam, and we're gonna have a good little tribute. This episode's going to launch on Wednesday, March 6th, and Tim was killed on March 9th, 1969.
Mhm.
So it's going to mark the 55th anniversary of
Yeah,
the death of him in
yeah,
Vietnam.
yeah.
So this is a tribute episode, and I hope a lot of the family that has not been listening, will join in and listen to this episode to learn a little bit more about Tim and
Mhm.
remember him from 55 years ago.
Yeah,
Let's talk about Tim and some of your first stories. First of all, you were born October
to
of 1943.
right,
Tim was born August 14th, 1944. So
right.
put you guys about 9 or 10 months apart.
That's right.
So you were real close
Yeah,
in age.
and we were outnumbered. We both had
Oh, yes.
I had 2 sisters and Tim had 4 sisters, so
Okay.
it was a frickin' frack,
Yeah.
Skip and Tim.
And your mothers were extremely close,
Yeah,
right? They
we're
were.
correct. Yeah.
And what
Mhm.
was their age difference? They
A
were.
couple of years.
Yeah.
Aunt Jerry and my mom, Fredra,
Okay.
they were a couple of years, difference, and then, of course, then there was, Aunt Dorothy and Aunt Olga
So four sisters
and 2 brothers,
and two
Earl
brothers.
and Jean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Perry family was 6 children,
Yes.
and my mother's side of the family, the Carroll family, was 8 children.
Right.
Yeah. So 8 and 6. So you guys had a ton of cousins.
Yes. And
Just
boy, when there were get-togethers, it was a reunion every time. The holidays were just always really a great celebration.
yeah. And almost everyone lived in San
And
Jose.
everybody, well, they all did, yeah, except I think Aunt Olga lived up in San Carlos.
San
Aunt Olga
Carlos.
and Uncle Ed. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But San Jose was the base, and
Yep.
it was some big parties,
Oh, yeah.
especially if you had the Perrys and Carrolls together.
Right.
It was
Oh,
it
yeah.
was on.
It
And
was
then
crazy. Yeah.
tell me real quick, there was a one where didn't two sisters were sisters marrying brothers?
Yeah.
I know that was on the Carroll side. Two sisters married two Sturchy brothers,
Yeah.
but on the Perry side, were
On the
there
Perry side, it wasn't, it was 2 cousins.
two cousins?
Uncle Gale,
Okay,
who was married to Aunt Dorothy, and
Yeah.
my dad were first cousins.
there we go. Okay,
And so they married sisters,
all right. So two
Dorothy and
cousins,
Fredra. Right.
and the two, but your father was a Dodge, but
Right.
Dorothy's husband Gail
Was a Florin.
was a Florin. Okay,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that was
The hookup there was, Uncle Gale's, mom, Aunt Rose,
Aunt Rose,
was, Aunt Lottie, my, grandmother,
and
my
she
dad's
was a
mom.
Dodge.
They were sisters.
Okay,
They were sisters.
all right.
And so that was the connection that made Uncle Gale and my dad
Oh, there we go.
cousins.
So what was their maiden name? Those sisters, Lottie was, what was her last name?
You would ask me.
That's your mother's maiden name.
Well, no, my mother's no, because that's my dad's side.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Yeah. And you know what? Can you
All right.
believe that?
Well, here
I
we're
know
not.
that. I believe it was Patnude.
What was it?
Patnude.
Patnude.
Patnude. Patnude.
Okay.
Yeah.
Patnude.
Patnude.
Not a good vision for our viewers. That's a good one. I've never heard that
My
name.
2
Skip.
sisters will probably end up correcting me, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was probably Patnude.
All right. Okay. Well, I want to hear the story because we're gonna start talking about Tim, and this really does make a lot of sense. Thinking that you had 2 sisters
Mhm.
and Tim had 4 sisters, so
Right.
there were 6 girls
Right.
just in the mix, and it was just you and Tim. So you
Right.
guys were a couple of renegades,
Yeah.
and they just probably shooed you guys outside, a lot like my mother did
That was their
to
first
me.
mistake.
Yeah, to turn you loose.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in those days, I mean, I got turned loose at,
Yeah.
I can remember my mom at 7, 8, 9 years
Right.
old, turning me loose outside, as long as you're home by dark.
Yeah.
And it was,
Times
Well-
were different.
you had to be creative
Yeah.
because toys were limited.
Right.
And usually toys that I got and brought outside, I broke within a couple of days because I either shot them with a BB gun, blew them up with a firecracker,
Mhm.
lit them on fire with WD-40. I mean, something. It was just some kind of destruction, but toys
Yeah.
didn't last that long.
Yeah.
So then you just had to find stuff to blow up and, light on fire and play
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear the story about you and Tim washing Uncle Bud, my grandfather, Bud Carroll, your Uncle Bud,
Right.
washing his truck. Tell me about that one,
Well, it
Skip.
kind of started early, just a couple of weeks earlier. Tim and I had gotten in trouble. We always, Uncle Bud and Mr. Jones, my dad, all the men, they'd always walk around smoking cigarettes and they'd throw their cigarette butts on the ground. Now, Tim
Of
and I were,
course. Where else could
yeah,
they go then?
right. And Tim and I were like 5 or 6 years old, and
Okay.
like little magnets, we would go around picking up the cigarette butts. And so we figured one day when we had enough,
Now, wait, did you start smoking them?
well, that was the whole idea. We were
Okay.
going to take him to the barn and smoke cigarettes like our dads,
Okay.
5, 6 years old.
Yeah.
So while in the barn, well, we're lighting matches.
Gotta have some matches.
Hay's all around, hay on the ground. Hay, there's hay. Anyway, we caught the
Caught
barn on fire.
On fire.
Yeah, luckily it didn't burn to the ground. We were really fortunate. Mr. Jones came running out. Mr. Jones was
Caretaker.
the caretaker of the property, and he came running out and swatted Tim and I both. And but anyway, so Tim and I got in trouble, and your grandfather, my Uncle Bud, who I loved dearly, it was one of the greatest mentors of my life, told Aunt Jerry, keep those two away from me. Because
I'm gonna do some
right
harm to
now
'em.
I'm hot.
Yeah.
I'm really hot under the collar. They lost a little bit of gear in
Okay.
the tack room,
Yeah. Oh,
you know,
boy.
and stuff like that. And he was just livid.
Yeah.
And he said, just keep them away from me. So we stayed. I tell you what, that went on for a couple of weeks.
Couple of weeks, you stayed clear.
Stayed clear. So he came
Yep.
home one day. I think he had if I'm not mistaken, he had a meeting at the bank, and he had come home for lunch, and Aunt Jerry had fixed him a sandwich or two. And as he's going into the house, he had just bought a brand new, I think it was a 1949
Studebaker.
Studebaker pickup.
Wow. Brand new Studebaker pickup.
Brand new, yeah. And so we said, could we wash your truck for you while you're, yeah, go ahead, Uncle Bud.
Yeah, go ahead and wash it.
So we're washing the truck. While we were washing the truck, he's in there eating a sandwich, and we thought, well, he probably needs some gas. So we stuck the water hose. What do we know?
Yeah.
Stuck the water hose in the gas tank
Filled up the tank.
and filled up his gas tank for him. So I guess he got about, and in those days, Swift Lane, Tully Road, that was a pretty good
A couple miles
drive
out of town.
before you get to the main road.
Mhm.
And he got about halfway, and the truck gave out. And Uncle Bud had an appointment with the banker and missed his appointment, called up the Studebaker dealership and was just ripping them. Brand new truck, this shouldn't happen, blah, blah, blah. Well, a day later, they called him up and they said, Bud,
Oh, and they had come picked up the broken down truck after he belittled them about their
exactly, took it in.
Yep.
Yep. And said, Bud, somebody put water in your gas tank. It took him a few days to figure out what happened. And then he started thinking,
They washed my truck.
two little shits.
Filled up my tank
Yeah.
with a few gallons
and
of water.
we did. And so needless to say, we were back on the boogie list for,
Yeah.
for
You
a
were
while.
the two first 6-year-olds
Yeah.
with a wanted poster
Yeah.
in San Jose.
Actually, it was Aunt Jerry said that actually a couple of days later he was laughing. He couldn't wait to tell his friends these stories. And
Yeah.
because
And then what happened with the truck? What does water in a tank
yeah, I
do?
think I don't know exactly. I don't know. I don't know that's
Yeah.
what happened with the truck.
They fixed it.
I know he was driving another truck, but I don't remember exactly how that went down. Be honest with you, I don't remember.
That is
All I
great.
was all I was doing was looking behind me, and anytime I was riding, I'm waiting for a boot in my butt. But
Yeah. You were probably pretty fast as a little kid there because if they couldn't catch you, they couldn't beat you.
oh boy, we took a couple of wallops, but we had them coming.
Yeah. You always had them coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all right. Well, that's a great story. There was another story you had told me about another time that you and Tim got involved in one of Uncle Bud's pickup trucks.
Yeah, we were. I think we were about 11,
Okay, fast forward
10,
11 years
11.
old
Yeah,
now.
about 5 years later on, and
Now you knew how to drive them.
yeah, well, he had taught us how to drive, and we could drive the old, I think it was like a 48, 49 white Ford pickup truck, and it was the ranch truck, and we could drive this truck around the ranch.
Well, you stayed on the ranch.
Couldn't take it off the ranch, but we could drive it all over the ranch to do our chores and stuff.
Yeah.
Because we would go up there. We actually were let loose on the ranch, and Tim and I stayed up there all summer
Working.
working on the ranch, the two of us. And, that wasn't where anybody lived at that time,
Mhm.
except he had a foreman that lived up there on the ranch,
Okay.
Harold. I remember his first name was Harold. And so, uh, and there was a day when it was like, it was 100 degrees.
Yeah.
It was hot.
And that area of San Jose was like the hottest part of San
that
Jose.
East Foothills, and
Yeah,
that
no
afternoon
trees.
sun just beat down on you.
Yeah.
And so the Coyote
Creek.
down
Mhm.
below, there was a couple of great swimming holes down in there. So Uncle Bud said, if you guys want to go down after work and go swimming, just saddle up the horses, take the horses down.
Yeah.
Well, that was really, really a hot day, and it was about a mile ride down there. We didn't want to do that. Hey, nobody, who's going to know if we
no
drive?
one's
We're just
ever
going to
gonna know.
drive the truck down the road there, and so we backed the truck down this dirt road,
Mhm.
and then right below there is the swimming hole, and so we put it out of gear and
Put the brake on.
put the brake on, and
Everything stops.
yeah, so we're down there swimming in the hole, and all of a sudden, Tim yells, "Here comes the truck!" And the truck is it's just coasting right down and into the water. The only thing that was sticking out of the water was the engine compartment, the front end of the
Thank
truck.
God. That's what
Thank
probably
God.
saved it.
Thank God we didn't park it
The other way.
the other way,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we'd have really been in trouble.
Sure.
And
So the bed down
you
into
had
the
bed
water.
down, and the front of the truck sticking up
Cab
out of the water.
soaking wet.
Cab is full of water.
Yeah.
And the old Filipino farmer down there had this old Ford tractor, and he was able to pull the truck out, and we were able to get it started, and we drove it up. Well, about 2 or 3 days later, Uncle Bud comes up to the ranch, and he goes to get in the truck, and the seat, those were old foam seats.
Yeah, so you couldn't get the water
Yeah,
out of there that quick.
right, and the leather on the seat, or the upholstery on the seat, was all torn, and anyway, because and
We promised we didn't put any water in
Yeah.
the gas tank, but it got
I told him the truth. I told him the truth 17 years later.
17 years.
I was 27 years old, and I was up in Modoc hunting,
hunting deer with them.
and
Yeah,
and
but also had a
we were
1,000-acre ranch. How big was it?
I think it was about 2,300 acres.
2,300 acres in
Yeah.
Modoc County.
In Modoc County,
Mhm.
right, or just outside of Cedarville, on the
Okay.
county road. Yeah, it was a beautiful piece of property. Oh boy, what a place! That was a little slice of heaven right
Yeah,
there.
and you guys would go up deer hunting. So
We'd
you
go
told
up
him
deer
the
hunting.
story,
Yeah.
and by that time he got a pretty good kick out of it.
Oh, he says, "Oh, you guys, you were up there."
Yeah,
You know?
it was Tim. Did Tim tell him the story?
No, no, this was later. Tim was, let's see, by 27, that would have been, let's see, how old was I?
Yeah. Tim was no longer with us, and
Yeah,
that probably would have been in
it was around 1970. Yeah, it was
Right.
like a year and
before
a
he
half
passed
after
away.
when Tim had passed away. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And just not long before Bud passed away.
not long after.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's good. That is, those are visual stories,
Yeah.
always with a motorized vehicle involved,
oh yeah,
when you're on a farm.
yeah.
And I
If
bet
this was a 5-hour talk here, I could fill it with stories with Tim. He was.
all right, we're gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna talk about Tim for a little while, and then we'll come back to some other
Sure.
stories. But so the information I wanted to just get on on record is basically about Tim's service in Vietnam.
Mhm.
So Tim was born August 14th, 1944, and he was killed on March 9th, 1969. And that brings us 55 years.
Mhm.
That's been 55 years. He was 24 years old. Tim's full name was Timothy Michael Carroll.
Mhm.
He was drafted into the Army
Right.
early in 1968.
Mhm.
And he deployed in Vietnam. His first day in Vietnam was June 20th, 1968.
Mhm.
So he was in country for about 10 months before he was killed.
Yeah, and I think the tour was what, 11
1 year.
months?
1 year, 11 months.
11 months. I think back in those days it was 11 months.
11.
So he
Oh,
was probably a month shy of coming
gotcha.
home.
Wasn't even 12 months. So he was
Yeah.
only he would have been home in May. So he was 6 to 8 weeks away from
Yeah.
coming home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tim was in the B Battery of the 5th Battalion, 16th Artillery Regiment, part of the 4th Infantry Division.
Mhm.
And that's on his gravesite. And I always remember seeing all those numbers, not knowing a lot what they meant. But what they meant was the 4th Infantry Division had the Artillery Regiment of the 16th Artillery. The 16th Artillery was formed in 1916 during World War I
Mhm.
and served all through during World War II, and then was deactivated through Vietnam and deactivated in 1975 at the end of Vietnam.
Mm. Okay.
He was the 5th Battalion, the B Battery. They fired 155 millimeter howitzer guns, and then also 8-inch self-propelled guns. So that was a gun, 8-inch, about the same size as 155 millimeter, but they were so it looked like a tank.
Yeah.
So they were on treads.
Right.
So self-propelled guns, so you could move them around a lot easier. You didn't have to trailer them around like
Mhm.
a regular field gun.
Mhm.
And they fired both of those. He was stationed at a fire base
Mhm.
up in the Central Highlands, about 30 miles northwest of a city called Pleiku.
Mhm.
And it was
Yeah.
Canton Province, which they knew as the Central Highlands. So if you kind of envision Vietnam as a real long strip along the water,
Yeah.
Hanoi being very in the north, all the way to the top north, and Saigon, now called Ho Chi Minh City, in the south. This was just about midway, and it was almost near. It was very close to the Cambodian border.
Right.
He was mere miles away from the Cambodian border, and a lot of times when they would be shelled, they would be shelled from Cambodia into Vietnam.
Right.
Um, and his time there, I know that he sent home when I was a little kid, that he sent home to my grandmother, Jerry, your aunt, um, cassette tapes of him talking. And I remember those cassette tapes playing, everybody being incredibly upset over those, and they would turn them off after a few minutes. But
Mm.
it sounded like
Yep.
routine work. He wasn't, he wasn't pounding the infantry. It wasn't in the going out on search and destroy missions. He was at a fire base,
Right.
so he was a little more comfortable. They had I remember seeing pictures of cases of Budweiser beer, the white and red
Yeah.
cans, and um, it was all in it was cans of beer, and it looked like it was just cases of Budweiser
Yeah.
beer. So he had he had a relatively safe, injury-free time up until he was killed. I know he went on an R&R trip.
Mhm.
I believe it was about 3 months before that, so probably sometime November, December, and he went to Australia.
Mm.
In
Mhm.
Australia, he met a woman, that was his girlfriend, and after he was killed, she came back and she was at his funeral. You
Yes.
remember
Yeah.
meeting tell
Remember
me about
meeting her.
that.
Yep. Yeah. I didn't really get much of a chance to talk to her. I know knowing Tim, she was a beautiful young woman
Beautiful woman,
and
about his same age.
about the same age as Tim,
Yeah,
and just that they had met in Australia, and they were they were writing letters,
and I
and
think he probably planned to have her come to the United
I'm
States
sure,
afterwards.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
but yeah, I don't know much more about her than that. I know you had mentioned that she had been around. She stayed around for a little while,
I
and then went.
remember one of my
Yeah,
aunts, telling me that she had stayed around a little while
right.
and perhaps maybe kinda wore out her welcome, and then she went back to
Yeah,
Australia.
yeah, yeah. But
So, March 9th, 1969, day in the firebase. Let me preface it with I went down a couple of um, rabbit holes about the 16th Artillery, and a lot of veterans would post their stories on there.
mhm,
And there was one story that mentioned the day that he remembered when Tim Carroll from California was
right.
killed. Another one mentioned two soldiers being killed in March of '69, and one of them had a nickname of Stony. and I never remember that nickname. Not sure if that was the same, but I couldn't find any records of anywhere of how many artillerymen were killed, in those
Mhm.
fire bases,
Yeah.
the records. I mean, it's going to take more of a dissertation attempt to try to isolate those.
Right.
I know, just doing the research, that 90% of the killed in action in Vietnam were white males, or is that 88%? Um, 50% were Catholic. Um, 70 or 80% were enlisted, E1, E2,
Mhm.
E3. So unfortunately, Vietnam was a war of the young,
Right.
inexperienced uh, U.S. Army
Yeah.
that were killed. And
Sounds like most wars.
yeah,
Get these young kids out there and
yeah. I mean, not the last wars we've been fighting, but Vietnam. And also another fact I saw of the casualties were only 25% of the killed in action were drafted.
mm,
75% of killed in action were volunteers.
mm,
So I think the American public always felt like everyone who was killed was drafted.
yeah.
Now, unfortunately,
I didn't know that. Mm,
Tim was drafted and
yeah.
wasn't planning on serving in the military.
Right.
He was a little bit later in life, so he got drafted at 23 years old,
Mhm.
and just he wasn't going to go down the military path. But he got called, he got drafted,
Right.
and he went.
Yeah.
He manned up, he went, and he did a gallant job, what he was
Yeah.
told to do.
Well, and
And
a lot of guys that were drafted didn't go. A lot of them
no,
went to Canada and South America
yeah,
and all that and like you said, Tim just, he this was his country and he was going to do his duty
yeah, yeah.
and did it
And
and
he
did
had
it
a
well.
and he had a stroke of bad luck. So on
Yeah.
March 9th, 122 millimeter shell that they were being constantly barraged
Right.
with these shells. They started shelling, and as you knew the story, him and a few three of his friends went into a bunker
Mhm.
and was directly hit by a shell.
Yeah, and it's amazing because those bunkers are really small, like I was telling you earlier, and they'll only hold like four guys could only get into this bunker, and one of the other guys, there was actually five of them
Going to chow
going to chow,
midday,
and the other guy realized that he couldn't fit in there, and he started hightailing it, and he said the concussion
knocked him.
knocked him for a loop, but he wasn't injured. And then when he went back, the
Two were
two were
Tim and
Tim and
another were
another
were
young man
deceased.
were deceased, and the other two survived for a short time, but they were badly hurt.
Yeah.
And uh, but yeah, can you imagine the way he described it? It's almost like putting a Dixie cup 20 feet away from you, and then get a ping pong ball and try to throw it into a Dixie cup.
Sure.
That's the odds.
Yeah. No, it was
But that,
chance. It was, a life of good luck, and all
yep,
it takes is
yeah,
1 second of bad
yeah,
luck to end your life.
yeah,
And you can think of go through your life.
right.
Skip, you're 80 years old right now,
Yeah, I'll be 81 this year. Yeah,
81.
yeah,
Uh, Go back on your life and think of how many times you were this close.
yeah,
If something would have been a little left, a little to the right, whether being in a vehicle,
right.
being you've done a lot of hunting,
Yep.
being on the top of a mountain, um,
Oh,
being
yeah,
around firearms.
yep.
It it's something that it was a stroke of bad luck, and unfortunately, that was
Well,
that
I
was the
believe the
outcome.
good Lord numbers our days,
Yeah,
and why he took Tim as early as he did. I guess hopefully we'll find out someday.
yeah,
But it's just that's just life. And I mean, I've lost, like all of us, we've lost family members and friends and stuff like that. But there were two deaths in my lifetime
yeah.
that affected me more than anything. You're going to lose your parents because they're going to get older. That's
Yes,
normal. You're going to
yeah,
lose your grandparents.
yes,
But to lose a young man like Tim and as close as we were, and when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Those 2 deaths affected me more than anything. I cried for days on both of them.
Yeah.
And, but Tim really, that just hammered me.
Yeah.
It just broke my heart.
Well, unfortunately, it, really changed the family dynamics
Yeah,
of the Carroll family as well. I grew up as, witnessing that as a small child, and, as a even, as a young man, it was always, the tragedy of the Carroll family.
yeah. Well, the
Um
funny thing too, Pat, is, the Carroll family goes back a long time in Santa Clara Valley. People knew who the Carrolls were. And, that funeral of Tim's, that military funeral, had to be one of the largest. I've been told by the police, some of the guys, the cops there, they'd never seen a bigger funeral.
Yeah, my
There were
mom
so many people there.
and my father being on San Jose Police
Right.
Department, um, he had, told me that story too, that
Yeah.
they had used their entire motor division, about 40 motorcycles, and they had all agreed that it was the largest funeral they had seen in San Jose.
Yeah. Yeah. It was amazing. It
Yeah,
was amazing the turnout of people.
yeah, that
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
um, and, just like that,
Yeah.
something ends, but
Yeah.
that's why we're talking about it today.
Right.
We wanna talk about that and, those stories. So Tim received a Bronze Star,
Hmm.
and he did he did an upstanding job while he was there.
Yeah.
He was never, in trouble. He was a good artilleryman.
Yeah.
He fired the big guns like he was told. They were barraged constantly. He was in a place that those Central Highlands were some of the first places that fell to the Viet Cong because that
Hmm.
was part of splitting Vietnam in half.
Yeah.
So he was in a location that was not not destined, I think, for victory. How the war went, it was
Right.
one of the it fell sooner than later, right?
Yeah.
After they split the country in part, and he was, he was close. He almost got out of there,
Hmm.
and like we said, one second of bad luck, but um, we'll never forget him. The family will never forget him.
Right.
And I believe, he died as a hero.
Yeah. 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 No, and it was funny too, because, there was a time when Tim and I were in high school, he went to, Pioneer High School.
Okay.
Now, Pioneer High School was a branch off from Willow Glen High School. When Willow Glen got so big, they split the school,
Built
and a lot
Pioneer
of
High
our
School.
close friends went to Pioneer,
Okay.
and, so Tim and
Everybody who lived south went to Pioneer High
went to
School.
Pioneer High School.
Yeah.
And so, uh, it was funny, in those years, uh, Tim and I we didn't see as much of each other
Mhm.
because, I was involved in athletics, and I was also involved in working.
Yeah, worked like crazy by the time you're in high school.
Oh, I was,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why yeah, my trade was the meat business,
Mhm.
and I learned the meat business at the Lincoln Glen market. So I was between working and my girlfriend, and Tim was busy doing his thing, and
Yeah.
we would see each other, but not as often as we did when we were younger.
Yeah. Probably more working on the ranch or doing that kinda stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and so, uh, uh, I did work over at the, San Jose Tallow Company for a short time,
Oh, okay.
and that was right across the street from Uncle Bud's, uh, shop, where he had the dehydrator, where
Okay.
they used to make all the feed for the
And what street was that on? Like
uh,
16th
it
or
was off of, oh boy, um
it was down Central San Jose?
yeah, yeah, it was kinda almost northeast San Jose over.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember the
Old
name.
Oakland Road
Yeah,
along
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
off of the old Bay Shore.
Okay.
Yeah, and, but I can remember when we would, um, be at the shop, and these guys at the tallow plant would be cooking that tallow.
Oh god, the smell of that.
Oh, as Uncle Bud used to say, it'd be enough to gag a maggot,
Yeah, okay.
and boy, that's what it was.
Yeah, the
and
smell
and
of tallow.
And I remember we would sit there, and you could see the guys on lunch bring their lunch buckets out and sit right along where all the carcasses were and all the They'd sit there and eat their lunch.
And they were just immune to it.
And then my first job there was down in the, not to get so graphic, but it was down in what they called the gut room,
Yeah, the gallows.
the gallows. And boy, what they would do is they'd pick up all these dead animals, like somebody's horse would die or a cow. And then when they would, to use a, gut them,
Okay.
it would go down a big slide.
Okay.
And then you would separate all of the stuff,
The organs.
and I was down there in hip boots. And
Wow.
that job lasted 3 days.
3 days.
That was it.
Okay.
Yeah, I went back to work in the market.
Yeah, that was if there's I mean, that makes meat cutting look like,
Oh,
spreading daisies, huh?
man, oh, man. But, anyway, yeah, so Tim and I, even though we stayed in touch, and we saw each other, we didn't do a lot of stuff together because
You
I
were
was
busy.
preoccupied doing my thing. He was
Yeah.
preoccupied doing his thing. And
When did Tim had a Corvette. He had a 1962 red Corvette.
the one he rolled,
Oh, he rolled it over, huh?
yeah.
I didn't hear that story. Did he get that car brand new? Was it
I believe
old?
if I'm not mistaken, I think Uncle Bud gifted him that car. I believe that's what I was told.
Okay,
Uncle
and was
Bud bought
that
it.
maybe about high school graduation?
Well, 62 would have been maybe a graduation present or something like that. Although
Yeah.
Tim, I don't know that
Yeah.
Tim ever graduated high school.
He was
but
close.
it's
He was
close.
close. I wanna interject one, story that just popped in my mind that I can't believe I had it down as to get to it at the end, but, because you brought up Pioneer High School. So my daughter attended Pioneer High School,
Right.
and, in 2000, she graduated in 2018. So, Tristan, you graduated in 2019? Yeah, so Kaylee graduated in 2018. So, in the fall of 2017, Kaylee took on a project there,
Yep.
to do a tribute to any men who went to the men that went to Pioneer High School that were
Right.
killed in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And she wanted to make, um, she wanted to make a plaque
Right.
and have a tribute to those. So she started researching, and I believe she found there was 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And you were at the you
Well,
were
well,
were you
here
at
was the deal. As you know, I'm living down in San Diego, and I got I got the flu,
okay.
and I remember I was really sick, and but I called 5 of my friends. The one thing about my class in 1961 at Will Glen High School, we've had a class reunion every 5 years. We just had a class reunion. We used to do every 5 years. We're
Every
doing them
5
every
years.
2 years now.
Oh yeah. Well, because you don't want to wait 5 years.
Yeah,
Okay.
but the last 5-year one we did was the 60th, and there were 100 and I think 150
Wow.
at that reunion.
What was your class size?
375,
And you had 150
150. Well, now some
the
of those were
60th
their wives,
spouses. Yeah.
spouses, and stuff like that. But yeah, always had it. But to this day, I mean, I was emailing 5 of my buddies this morning. But anyway, 5 of the guys went there on my behalf,
Yeah.
and but I went.
It was a big event.
Yeah, I
there was
went
a
there.
huge turnout.
I went there like a few months later.
Oh, you
I
saw
made
it.
I made a special trip to
Good.
San Jose to go to Pioneer
Yeah.
to see the plaque.
Yeah.
And actually, I went into the principal's office. Principal took me in there and told me all about it. And didn't realize I was your,
Okay.
They're
They're pretty proud of it there, huh?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and it's right there hanging in their gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So that was Kaylee's basically a volunteer senior project, and she isolated these names,
All right,
did research. We had a plaque made,
all right,
and we had a dedication ceremony
right.
with about 50, 60 people
Yeah,
attending, and it was a good day.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it was a good tribute, and there was by his his great niece,
mm-hmm.
um, almost 50 years later.
Right.
And so Pioneer High School, you talked about that, and I wondered with Willow Glen of how many veterans were killed at Willow Glen. San Jose had about 100 kids killed in Vietnam
Yeah,
in San Jose, because there's a memorial downtown
yeah.
San Jose that you've been to that memorial,
Right,
right by the Shark Tank,
right.
and I want to say it was 100, 120. It
I
was a pretty good
personally
number.
know 2 other families who lost their sons, and they were actually went to our high school.
It went to Wild
Uh,
Glen.
there was a good friend of mine, Dennis Krill, his brother Bill Krill. I think Billy was like 2 or 3 years younger than us, and Billy was killed over there. And then there was a kid that was a year ahead of me, by the name of, Louis Menendez, and who I knew quite well, and I even knew his family quite well, and the younger brother, Rudy Menendez, was killed there, and I remember talking to his dad, uh, about a month later, came into the store and was telling me how he was killed, and so
Yeah.
yeah, a
It's a bad
lot of
time.
guys.
Yeah, it's a
I don't
bad
know the
time for this
exact
country.
count in San Jose, but do you know there
It
was
it was over 100.
yeah,
It's on the, it's a great memorial. If anybody's downtown San Jose
right,
by the Shark Tank,
right,
it's right there on Santa Clara, just, a half a block east of, it's in between the Shark Tank
right,
and the highway there,
yeah,
and they did a fantastic job. In fact, we went there, and the mayor honored Kaylee, as, when they were
mhm,
when they it was, I believe, on, it was on Memorial Day, I believe,
yeah,
a Memorial Day event, but Kaylee showed up and they
yeah,
gave her a shout out. So it was a good, and that was what I'm so proud of her about that is that, that was done 100% without, that was her idea.
mm,
It was her idea, and the principal let her go into the archives
mm,
and find these names, and
yeah,
what she did was confirming that the names that she thought actually did go to Pioneer High School. So
yeah,
she
yeah,
did she would do hours and hours of this
yeah,
research, and she did a really good job. Let's talk about this Corvette because in the fall, my wife and we were traveling from Nashville, Tennessee
mhm,
to Louisville, Kentucky, and right along the way and outside of Bowling Green, Kentucky is the National Corvette Museum.
mhm,
So because I own my father's Corvette, I now caretake my father's 1982 Corvette. Uh, and then with Tim having a Corvette, it meant a lot to stop there and see this. And I did see a 1962 Corvette, and we believe it wasn't red. I think it was a gold one, but we think that Tim's Corvette was 1962.
yeah, yeah.
And he sped around in that thing, driving
Oh,
hot laps around
well,
Almaden.
I can he took me for a ride one time, and that was the last time I got in that thing.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
What
But
was it? The big motor Corvette too? Did it have
it was big enough.
the
Well, there was the
327
327, there was a 280, I think there was a 283 and
or
a
a 327?
327.
It probably
And
had the
yes,
big
he had
motor.
that 327 fuel injected,
Yeah.
Corvette, and I'm gonna tell you what, that was a rocket ship.
Yep.
It was a rocket ship on wheels, that thing one time.
Yeah.
It's
Do you know what happened to it after Vietnam? What,
I don't. I don't.
yeah, I've
I don't.
asked my mom and no, I can't, I'm gonna have to dig into what happened to that
Yeah,
car. I'm sure afterwards, it was such a part of his,
yeah.
because did he drive it up until he went off to Vietnam? Did he have it for that long?
I don't think so.
Oh, you
Because
think it
I
was sold
keep
before
well,
Vietnam?
again, I don't know where I came up with this, and your sisters will or your mom will can probably correct me on this, but I swear that he rolled that thing. I don't know where I got that,
'Kay.
but I thought
It's
he
hard to
had
roll a Corvette too.
yeah, and but now I could be wrong.
Yeah. All right.
Uh,
We'll do a little
do a
more
little
research
research
on
on
the
that.
Corvette,
Yeah.
but Tim drove a Corvette. And yeah, that's so any other good stories? We've got a few minutes left. If you just I know with I know you got 100 of them. So
Well, the one story that always sticks in my mind was, one of the Perry boys, Uncle Earl and Uncle Gene.
okay,
Uncle Gene, when they lived, across from Claro Dam,
yeah,
Gene's place was down the road a little bit, probably another mile on the same side of the street.
yep,
And I don't know why we were there. We could have been there for Thanksgiving or something, but everybody was there.
big party at Uncle Gene's.
Yeah. And so Uncle Gene's house set down here, and there was a big hill
Mhm.
up here,
Yep.
okay? So Tim and I decided to walk up the hill.
And how old are you guys now?
Oh gosh, I'm guessing we're probably 12,
Okay.
11,
All right.
10, 11, 12, something like that. And we decided it'd really be cool to roll boulders down the hill.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of rocks up there, little
Oh
rock
yeah, there was
outgoes.
boulders, and it would take two of us to get these things. I mean, they were good sized boulders,
Yeah.
and then you'd roll them and watch them thing, boom,
Oh, yeah.
boom, boom, and
Free entertainment.
oh yeah, it was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Well, one boulder,
Kept going.
well, what it did was it hit something and went off track and was heading for Uncle Gail's and Aunt Dorothy's brand new Oldsmobile.
Oh, boy.
And I mean, it looked like it was going to hit it broadside. And how it got through, uh, there was another car parked behind it. And we remember, all we could remember was that boulder
Shooting the gap.
shooting the gap. Never touched the car. And I mean, this boulder was this big.
Oh, my God.
It would have totaled the car.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, those were the things that, it was harmless, fun things. That's how you entertained yourself back in the day.
Yeah.
We didn't sit in a house playing games.
There were no computers.
We were always out.
Yeah.
We were always out. And one other story was, and it was a lesson learned.
And that was the last boulder that went down the hill.
Oh, that was it. We said that's enough of that.
Did the parents ever come out? Because now the boulder's on the ground. You're not moving it.
Yes.
Did they come out and say, God, where are these rocks coming from?
Uncle Gail came.
Uncle Gil came out.
Yeah, because he heard the boulder. They actually could hear it.
Yeah.
Because it hit something. And I don't remember what it hit, but it hit something, made a loud noise, and he came out. And when he saw the boulder, I remember him looking at the two of us.
Little
He said-
troublemakers.
and it was something like, you guys don't know how close you came to escaping death.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
But I remember, I remember, a couple of things that Tim and I would do. But we were really good kids. And we were good kids. We were just, we didn't have a whole lot between our ears at that time. It wasn't,
Yeah.
it wasn't, but that's what we did.
Yeah.
What happened was it was in the summer, and Tim and I they were living up in Claro, and I was staying up there for a week or two. I don't remember how long I stayed up there, but it was quite a while.
Yeah. The Carrolls were living up at up on the big white. Anybody
Yeah.
familiar with Almaden? So they had
And
the big white house
yeah,
in Almaden.
anytime I could spend time with the Carrolls and with Tim
Mhm.
and my cousins and Uncle Bud and Aunt Jerry, anytime I could do that, I'll tell you,
And wouldn't you say at the time, that was one of the biggest, there weren't a lot of other mansions in Almaden.
Oh, no, that was the
the
house.
biggest house.
oh, that was the house.
Okay.
But Tim and I we were riding the horses one day, and it was hot, and we were back up behind Calero Dam. We'd taken a big ride and everything, and it was hot. And when we came back, we were kind of bushed, and like not clear thinking young men,
You put them away
we
wet.
put the horses away wet, and just went in the house.
Yeah.
Uncle Bud came home a few hours later and drove by the corral and saw the horses with the dried. If you've ever seen a horse not get wiped down after a hard ride like that, that it's white. I
Yeah.
mean, it's literally, it's
Yeah.
the salt.
And that's not good for a horse, right?
No.
Yeah.
And Uncle Bud saw that, and he came into the house and he said, "Did you guys go riding today?" Yeah. Yeah. Where'd you go? Oh, we went back in Clarinet, man. Oh, did you check the corral, see if there was any water in the trough when you got back?
Oh.
Did you wipe the horses down? Did you do it? And all I remember, we were in a room about this size, and all I remember was us bouncing off the walls.
You're flying around.
Oh, he was booting us around that. Boy, he was
Yeah.
livid, man.
Yeah.
And he was going to teach us a lesson we'd never forget.
And he had no problem beating you the same as Tim, huh? You guys got the
No.
same beating.
No, we were both chopped liver, man. I'm telling you. Yeah, no, but you know what? It never bothered me.
Yeah.
Because that was, the one thing was when I grew up, one of the reasons I was up there, it was a safe place for me. At that time, my mom and dad, my dad was an alcoholic,
Yeah.
and always worked. They always provided, but my dad was a mean drunk
Didn't get happy.
and didn't get no. And so consequently, there was a lot of things that a young my sisters and I, shouldn't have seen,
Yeah.
and we saw some pretty graphic stuff. And so it was always a reprieve to either go to Uncle Gil and Aunt Dorothy's with my cousin Bill and
Mhm.
Gayleen, or of course, I loved going up at the ranch because I loved riding the horses. I loved being out in the sticks. Geez, it was just heaven for a young guy.
Yeah.
And Uncle Bud bought me my first cowboy boot, my first cowboy hat, and so no, I always wanted to be there, and I always respected him
Mhm.
tremendously.
And if you did that crime,
Yeah.
that punishment was
Oh,
you
yeah.
deserved that punishment.
That's the way it was,
You
boy.
you hurt his horses and,
Yeah.
you now, and tell me if I'm correct on this, if that same lesson was, "Oh, boys, next time try harder," maybe you didn't try harder. But
Yeah.
when you got tossed around a room and roughed up a little bit,
Oh,
it
yeah.
got your
Yeah,
attention.
yeah.
Did you ever put away a wet horse again?
Oh, heavens, no.
Yeah,
No,
there
no,
we go.
no. But as I said, my at that time, my dad was an alcoholic and a mean one. But I want to preface that by saying that when my dad was 59 years old, he finally admitted that he was an alcoholic and uh, admitted himself to a hospital
Yeah,
and went through a 30-day program. And there were 10 people in his group, and only two that made it out of there clean. And one of them was my dad. And when my dad died,
at
he
80
was 80 years old.
80 years old.
When he died,
Wow.
I believe he died on November the 4th, nine, that would have been 1970. No, no, excuse me, 1994.
Okay.
When my dad died, I actually did the funeral,
Mhm.
and my sisters asked me if I would, and I did it. There were more people there than there were family that I didn't know, and I was trying to figure out who
Yeah,
all
who
these
are these
people were.
people?
They were all AA guys that my dad had sponsored
Yeah,
over the years.
21 years of being
21
sober.
years being sober,
Yeah.
and he started 5 meetings,
Wow.
3 up in Plumas County, 1 in Portola, 1 in Gray Eagle, 1 in Quincy, and then 2 here in San Jose. And my dad always said that he owed his life uh, to
To the AA?
Alcoholics Anonymous,
Sure.
and he was going to make it the rest of his life's work to sponsor and try to help as many people as he could.
Yeah.
And my dad was actually a good sponsor because my dad grew up almost an orphan.
Okay.
When he was a young guy, he took care of his young brother because his mother had left the family and his dad was dead. And they
Grew up in
finally
San Francisco,
in
right?
San
Yep.
Francisco, and finally, two aunts, two old English aunts, took them in and raised them for a few years. But my dad, you talk about the hard knocks. He grew up going to Hard Knocks U, and like a lot of them did during the Depression. But he he did. He turned his life around and was an example to me and to my
Yeah.
sisters and to the family. Uh, how a person can change and how a person can turn their lives around.
Yeah.
So I admire my dad. I really, to this day, I mean, I really admire him, and I've always tried to pattern myself uh, out of the way he turned his life around.
Yeah. Well, 21 years of
Yeah,
doing that, that's a career.
yeah,
That
yeah.
that's a whole career. Um, I wanna, touch on one thing that, I don't talk about to
Hmm.
many people, but I am going to, put it on this podcast just because I think it has so much bearing of my Uncle Tim. But, Tim was killed on March 9th, 1969.
Right.
I was born September 17th, 1969. My mom was about 3 months pregnant with me,
Hmm.
when he was killed, and so I never met Tim, but we have a tremendous amount of similarities, and I knew I was gonna get emotional, but
Yeah,
I feel I could have been part of him,
yeah.
that my soul I've always had a very close, um, I feel him in me,
Hmm.
and I never met him.
You know who I see when I look at you?
my grandfather because
Yes,
we look
everybody
alike,
I
but
know, boy, you guys do.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
I
even your demeanor.
yeah, I
Yeah,
know. And I really and my cousin Austin is another spitting image.
right.
Yeah, I look nothing like Tim. But I find that I find that um I just have had a lot of thoughts,
Mhm.
about him of someone, and I think usually that's not that wouldn't be, to think about your father, think
Mhm.
about someone that was impacting your life.
Right.
Tim never made an impact in my life,
Mhm.
but here I have just this connection down to the soul, and it can make you wonder. But
You
we're
yeah,
both left-handed.
right.
We were both shyer kids growing up. I was a real shy kid. Wasn't until I was well into high school that I really kind of came out. I was very shy around girls. There wasn't a swim meet that I went to. You were competing in a swim meet. There wasn't a swim meet that I went to that I didn't go and throw up before. I
Right.
had a real nervous stomach. Um, so there's just a lot of similarities. And we're not going to ever forget them.
No. And the thing about Tim also was he 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 was he was a piece of work. When as a young man, he was a piece of work. But we talk about the military, and the one thing that really has stuck with me ever since we dedicated the flagpole over there in Almaden at the that horseman's thing.
Yes.
Remember?
Yes.
And your mom had that letter that she put there, and she talked about where Tim had uh, had gotten attached to a young little Vietnam boy,
An orphan.
an orphan,
Yes.
and wanted to bring that boy home,
Yeah.
and that showed you the young crazy kid before going into the service,
Yeah.
and the maturity over those 10 months,
What it did for him.
what it did for him.
Yeah.
And, he got the opportunity to see the real world as it is,
Yeah.
and that he saw stuff that we didn't get to see.
Yeah.
He had to mature quickly.
Yeah.
And the fact that, he had that kind of a heart touched me deeply too.
Yeah.
Whenever I come to San Jose, uh, down to the house, there's a couple places I stop by. I always go by our old home. There's not a time when I get to San Jose, I don't go by there and just sit there, park across the street, and
Mhm.
remember things. But the other thing to do is I always, go to the, cemetery, and I
Yeah.
visit my mom and dad, and I visit, Tim,
Yeah.
and I was there this Christmas, and I remember I always take flowers and just lay a big, bouquet of flowers there,
Yeah.
in remembrance, and talk to him for a little bit. But, like I said, that and this goes for our whole family, Patrick. When whenever it's, Memorial Day or Veterans Day or whatever, and there's all these postings on Facebook or whatever, and we're honoring our soldiers, and you can sense, the remembrance and the love that everybody had for Tim.
Yeah.
You ever read those?
Oh, yeah.
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 To this day, everybody, it's just are
Yeah.
touched, yeah. I wish you could have met him.
I know.
Yeah.
You brought up one thing about he saw things that people here didn't get to see, and he did things so we didn't have to see that.
Yeah. That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I left something at his grave one time. I know he smoked Camel unfiltered cigarettes in a soft pack.
Like his dad.
I found that. Is that what Uncle Bud?
Yeah,
Okay.
and my dad.
Camel unfiltered in a soft pack.
You ever smoke one of those?
And
Have you ever smoked?
I have. It's like smoking a cigar, but times three. I mean,
Yeah, it'll knock you on your butt.
yeah, it'll inject.
I think they're made out of camel dung.
Yeah. It is
Yeah.
it is a mouthful.
Yeah.
So I found I have some of his old um, fatigues and little
Mhm.
BDUs from Vietnam, and I was unwrapping, I was, had one looking at it, and in the pocket of it was an empty pack of these Camel unfiltered
Yeah.
soft pack. So I went to his grave, and I went into a liquor store there, around Kirtner Avenue, and I bought a pack of Camel filtered in a soft pack, and I laid that one day at his grave.
You know what?
I left him that pack.
You know what?
You thought the same thing?
No. I saw that pack of cigarettes.
Did you really?
I did.
I wonder
I
how long
saw
it stayed
some
there.
I don't know. I must have gone maybe the day or 2 for some reason. Isn't
I
that
know
weird?
exactly when it
I
was because
remember
I was in
seeing
high
those.
school, so it would have been 1987 or 1988, but I laid that down. I thought, "Well, I'm sure maybe someone will pick it up." It's a brand new full pack of
Yeah.
cigarettes, and I laid that down his grave. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah.
that was a fine tribute. I hope everybody that listened, knows a little bit more about Tim Carroll.
Yeah.
I hope everybody will think about him on March 9th,
Mhm.
and reflect. Everybody who remembers him will reflect, 55 years later,
Right.
and keep him alive in their memories.
You know, it's funny because I like to read my Bible, and, I have I have a number of Bibles, but I have a favorite one that I really like to read when I really wanna sit down and read the Word, and, in that Bible is, a
Give us a
photo.
picture.
I have a photo of Tim in that Bible
Yeah.
with, and you know, when he was born, I wrote on the back of the photo when he was. So hopefully somebody will find that
We'll
someday in
find
my
that someday.
Bible and realize that, and I put this was my cousin Tim, um, you know, so yeah. No,
Good.
we'll never forget him for
I hope
sure.
all our listeners enjoyed today, and I hope all the family members really get something out of this last hour. Um, thanks, Skip.
You're welcome,
We're
Patrick.
gonna
Yeah.
keep we're gonna do something we haven't done, but Skip and I have a lot to talk about the family as well. So we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back for another episode, and we're going to talk about some other family stories. We're gonna kind of parlay this into a
Yeah.
two-part episode since I got such a special guest here today. So thanks all. Have a great day.